Topic of this video, I am tired, really frustrated with the inability of anybody, including myself when I've seen it in myself, and I'm really working really hard to overcome this in myself. I am tired of the inability to not have a discussion, and I'm not even going to put the words constructive on it yet. Not even going to put the words positive or anything like that yet, because at the heart of it, it's the ability to have a sustained discussion. Not even if it's not always in every single moment respectful or constructive or empathetic or any other word you want to put on it to kind of qualify it and, differentiate between good and bad types of discussion. Look, the good type of discussion is the one that you follow through the hard moments, through the moments when you think you're not going to get anywhere with that person, through the moments where you think we're always going to disagree, through the moments where you think I am going to permanently lose respect for this person because of what they think and how they haven't changed what they think yet, even after I've explained time after time what this is. And I really firmly believe that, I'm explaining it accurately and everything else, right? When I'm tempted to say, look, we're never going to agree on this. Let's just stop talking about it. Or, worse yet, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I've written you off. You are never going to make progress on this, so I just will not talk to you about this anymore. That should always be in the other person's court. I will always talk about it again. I will always talk about it more. And if you don't want to talk about it more, then that's up to you to stop talking. But I can still try to engage with you even in the future beyond that, especially if the topic is important. And I'm speaking not only to people on one side of the political spectrum. There's this idea that, conservatives always engage in ongoing constructive or respectful debate just because one or two conservatives happen to have exemplified that. There's an idea that liberals are always unwilling to have a conversation. There's been a few frustrating experiences I've had with people who are expressing a liberal mindset, and just like completely focused on personal attacks, and what they were saying didn't make sense logically. And when I tried to point it out or ask for a more logical explanation of what they actually thought or believed, it was just nothing, or it was more personal insults. I do see that happening from the left on certain issues. But you know what? The reality is that's just the quality of person that those individuals are who I was debating or trying to debate with. It does not speak to the left side of the political spectrum at all, because there's a lot of people on the left who are willing to and do and have for years and years and years had long, meaningful, intelligent discussions and shared their perspective and their opinion and the facts that support it over and over and over again. The difference is between the quality of people, because there's also people on the right who have for years and years and years had those discussions over and over again, shared their opinions, shared facts that support their opinions, etc. And there's also people on the right on Facebook and elsewhere who, if you engage with them, and when I engage with them or try to engage with them, it's just complete radio silence after I make some points, or it is, instant personal attacks. It's no different than the personal attacks that I felt from the left when I stated something that offended the left. It's like both sides are just as prone to being offended, are just as prone to giving up on the conversation, just as prone to launching into personal attacks. And I'm tired of all of it. I've really been working on it with myself. I have one friend who I've been talking about for multiple years, I think, the issue of Israel. And I about had it with this person. And I felt like I spoke to her pretty disrespectfully at that time, which I feel bad about and felt bad about later. But we've definitely made amends, and maybe she didn't feel that way as much as I felt that way. But I had it with her because I laid out, this is what's happening. This is, these are the facts. And um, logically, your perspective doesn't make sense. Like, you, unless you hold a double standard, your perspective does not make sense. And if you do hold a double standard, you need to come out and say it, because you're not willing to come out and say that you hold a double standard. Because double standards towards people have to do with seeing one group of people as better than another group of people. And if you actually see it that way, you need to come out and say it, because otherwise our conversation, our debate gets stalled out, because there's this, viewpoint that's not logical based on everything you've said, but you're not willing to say that missing piece that makes it make sense. And then we can continue to debate it, but otherwise I'm having to kind of call you out on something that you're not willing to accept about yourself. And I laid it all out, and she's just like, no, that's not what's happening, but continued to go in the same circles that basically suggested that's what's happening without being willing or able to say it. And now, a long, long time later, many discussions later, and a few different attempts on my part to share from a little bit more personal experience, instead of like, let's pull this fact, that fact, and that fact. Like, hey, this is, I'm going to share with you the personal experiences that I have heard firsthand. So now I'm sharing them in their secondhand, but I heard them firsthand from the people who had those experiences. This is what they went through. And also, like, let's look at what some people who you respect have to say on the subject. And I'm not necessarily going to agree 100% with them, or even maybe at all with them and the conclusions they've drawn, but let's take the facts that they are quoting when they're coming to their conclusions, and let's use those facts. They're the same facts, by the way, facts are facts. They don't change based on who's presenting them. But if you're more comfortable, hearing that fact come from this person who you respect, okay, well, he said it too, or she said it too. So let's focus on that one. And then the other thing that happened was that she kind of became willing to say, like, well, I'm not willing to say I think this group of people is better than this group of people, but I do think this religion is better than that religion. I'm like, okay, we can discuss that. Like, we can have an honest conversation about that. And what I'm not going to do is just jump straight in and be like, well, you can't think that. You can think that. You're allowed to think that. It might even be true. Let's discuss the facts around it. Let's discuss the historical context. Let's discuss the actual text of the religions themselves. Like, let's actually dig into this with a mind that's open to the potential that what you believe is actually true. Because as soon as I dig my feet in about something that is debatable, that we can have a debate on, um, I lose credibility in her eyes, and then we can't ever get to the point of discussing the actual topic that I'm trying to discuss with her. So we have had very recently, including just today, some talks about that, and I'm not really trying to prove any point. I'm just trying to understand and communicate the truth of a situation. So, you know, people like her have thrown and do throw all these statements at me, expecting me to resist them and push back on them. And I'm just like, if the statement's true, the statement's true. I'm not going to argue about it. Um, but I'm also not going to get distracted by it because I'm trying to talk to you about this. And you keep saying, something about this other religion that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But sure, like, let's talk about that if that's what you want to talk about. And I'm going to agree with you wherever I agree with you, which happens to be a lot across the board. I'm going to hear your concerns, hear your thoughts, hear everything else. I'm going to say, yes, you're right. Yes, that does matter. And now can we talk about this too? Because this is what matters. And this is what the conversation started about. It's crazy how when you sustain a conversation with somebody, eventually the walls start to break down on both sides. Let's assume it's an argumentative conversation. Let's assume it's kind of like you're attacking each other. You're not really trying to attack each other, but you're attacking each other's viewpoints. You're attacking each other's opinions. And when two, it's like imagine two castles right next to each other and they're both just bombarding each other with, facts and opinions and anecdotes and arguments and, logical trains of thought. Eventually, both of those castles are going to erode and crumble. And what's going to be left is the truth that, both of those were built around. Because the walls were not the truth. The walls are a defense mechanism. Because I'm afraid that the other person's truth might overwhelm my truth. So I build all these walls around my truth to protect it. But that is counterproductive, because how am I going to share this thing that I've built a bunch of walls around to protect? Right? So we kind of have to dismantle each other's walls, and that just takes time. It takes sustained effort. And in the process, we learn to trust each other a little bit, because even though I don't like her opinion and she doesn't like my opinion, we realize that those are opinions that person holds based on their best interpretation of their life experiences, their viewpoints, their background, religious background, social background, everything else. And so I start to see that person I'm in communication with, I don't know why I accented that word wrong. I see that person who I'm in communication with as a human being who holds this opinion passionately, because that's what all of her beliefs, all of her thought processes, all of her mentors, everything else prior to this point has led her to. And the same is probably true of every other human being. And some people protect that opinion more frustratingly and ferociously than others. But, they just haven't been in communication long enough with somebody who is going to break their walls down at the same time as they are trying to break theirs down. The most dangerous thing is for somebody to not want to talk about their opinion. And I will say that the dangerous thing that enables that is when we don't want them to talk about their opinion. We don't want to hear about their opinion. We don't want to engage with their opinion. We don't want to have a debate with this person because their opinion is too wrong or too bad in our opinion, in our estimation, right? And that's where it gets really scary. You need to talk to people you disagree with. It's important. It's very uncomfortable. It's very frustrating at times. It will make you angry. Um, when you look at someone, you're just like, I cannot believe that you hold that opinion. It is so wrong. It is so disgusting. Um, it is so immoral. Whatever it is that you think about their perspective, it is frustrating. It makes you angry. It will cause tension. It really will. Um, but you cannot make their opinion go away by pretending it doesn't exist. You're actually just going to give them more room apart from any little thing that might have changed their mind. And I'm not trying to assume that anyone is the one who needs their mind changed. It could be you. It could be them. It could be both of you. It's most likely both of you, right? Um, but the really scary thing is to not talk to people that we disagree with. It will feel scary to talk to people we disagree with, but what's actually scary is not talking to them. And we really, really need to be doing that in our country, in our world right now. And it doesn't matter which side you're on, it needs to happen, right? Because the side that's in power may not be the side that's in power 4 years from now or even 2 months from now, depending on what happens between now and then. When we have as much division as we have today, right here, right now, United States of America and in the world, it makes it a scary place to be for everybody, not just the people who aren't in power. There maybe should be a little bit of special concern for people who aren't in power in an extremely polarized, kind of dangerous, divisive, and divided country or situation. But it could be scary for anybody. Bad things could happen for anybody. And I don't want bad things to happen to me, to people I love, to people I don't even know, to people I disagree with. I don't want bad things to happen to anybody. And I'm not sure that all the political attacking, I mean, it's important. Like, it's important to stand up and draw a line in the sand when you are in a position to do so and you feel very strongly that something is crossing a line that should not be crossed. It's important to stand up against that. And you need to do that when it's time to do that. Like when it comes right down to it and it's time to vote on an issue or it's time to speak your piece. If you're a congressman or woman or a senator or, someone in a governmental position, you gotta put your money where your mouth is. You gotta stand your ground. You have to have a backbone. All those things are true. But those actions apply in certain settings. And when it's not the time to be doing those things, you can still be having those conversations because that is just as important, if not more important. Because if you block somebody through a vote, you've accomplished preventing this thing that you disagree with for the next 2 years or 4 years or until whenever it comes up again, and you might not be in the same position to have a majority vote and you may not succeed the next time. So if it's really, really important to you, you would start having conversations with people at your level. Like everyday people having conversations with everyday people. It does matter. There's millions of us, politicians, having conversations with politicians, not just, going at each other's throats in these highly publicized meetings, trying to gain political points and trying to prove how wrong the other one is, which may or may not be justified. Um, like, yes, do those things if you feel that it's if you feel that is what you need to do to uphold your values and to stand up for what you believe in and to prevent the things you don't believe in from happening. Do those things, but please have conversations too. If you're a politician, have conversations with other politicians at your level, right? um, and have conversations with the intention of really understanding what they think and feel. Have conversations with the intention of helping them see what you think and feel as well. Have conversations with the intention of getting to the truth, and don't start the conversation assuming that you have a monopoly on the truth. Nobody should be doing that. Right? And I know I'm kind of like doing it right now a little bit by making that big blanket statement, but really, like, when you go into a conversation expecting that you hold all of the truth and the other person has no truth, then you've already written them off as a human being, right? You've said, you're so wrong. I cannot value anything you say. I cannot value any perspective you have. You have nothing to bring to this conversation. You have nothing that's accurate, nothing that's true, nothing that's respectable, nothing that's worth listening to. Why would you think that they're going to listen to you if you have that attitude about them? All they need to do is have the same attitude about you that you have about them, and now neither of you are going to listen to anything. And that's something that's happened with this person who I described, right? She has a bunch of concerns, a bunch of issues that I'm not really aware about, that I'm not thinking about, that I'm not aware of. And instead of being like, those don't matter, let's talk about what I want to talk about, I'm like, okay, if nothing else, that helps me see that you are a person who cares about other people, but can you please try to care about these other people too? Can you come to the realization that there's another group of people who need you to care about them because they're every bit as human as the people here and here that you are concerned about? Specifically, because I was specific about Israel, and I will be more specific and say that um, the intentional and strategic mistreatment of Palestinian people, not just a war on Hamas, not just a war on terror, which everybody I think can get behind, and not everybody because it does go into some complex issues, but on the surface level, everybody can um, support fighting terror and fighting terrorists, or at least the concept of going directly to war with people who have gone to war with you. Um, but the strategic and intentional and continuous mistreatment of men, women, and children, civilian, everyday people who happened to be born into this region, um, as a means to an end. I think it's completely immoral and wrong, and it should be stopped. And that um, as a nation providing funding, you get to be the boss. There's no reason that the U.S. should be taking its orders from Israel, or that the U.S. should be bowing to Israel and what they want. When you're the one providing the funding, you're the boss. That's how it works. Um, you get to make the calls. You get to say, "Hey, we're going to give you this money so you can defend yourselves, but you're going to play by American rules." And American rules are liberty and equality and justice for all. So you need to enact that. You need to uphold that standard. And if you can't, then we're not going to provide you funding anymore. That's the basis of my argument. And she wants to talk about the persecution of Christians in majority Muslim nations like Iran and Iraq. And that does happen. I am much less informed about that just because I haven't happened to have been around people who come from that background. I'm much less informed about it, but I'm not going to be naive or, defensive about something I don't know about. I think that it does happen, and I think that when it happens, it's wrong. And, so I'm going to make those statements. I'm not going to try to immediately distract from it or even pull it back to what the conversation was originally about, even though even though this really doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about. But in her mind, it does have something to do with it. Because in her mind, it's a fear that, if Israel doesn't take over and dominate this entire region, that this is what's going to be happening in Palestine, because Palestine is majority Muslim. I think. What I know is that Palestine contains both Muslims and Christians, and that the Muslims and Christians in that region specifically have lived peacefully with one another for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. And part of the history of that, to go into it really quickly, is, and this ties into why it has been so long, because the Armenian people were Armenia was the first nation to officially adopt Christianity as a nation. And then when the Armenians were persecuted, I'm part Armenian, by the way. When the Armenians were persecuted by the Turkish people, a lot of them fled to Palestine, and they've been living there for hundreds, if not over 1,000 years. And I don't know my history that well to say, but I know that it's hundreds and hundreds. So it's like, okay, I understand you have this concern about what's happening in Iraq and Iran, and those are valid concerns and they do matter, but that's not what has ever been happening in Palestine. And it's not something that's going to happen. What's happening currently is a massive amount of violence and deaths of innocent people as Israel pursues its political goals beyond defense. Because defense is a political goal too, but it's a political goal that I can support and that most people can support. It's the political goals beyond defense that I have a problem with personally. And you can see how if I just kind of tried to dismiss or shut down or say it's, this has nothing to do with it and I won't talk about it, what she wanted to talk about, then we're not going to get to the point of seeing how it is relevant from her perspective and me being able to address how it's relevant from her perspective, but to actually give an answer to that. And so sometimes you have to entertain those rabbit trails, entertain that sidetracking. Always, have it in the back of your mind to bring it back to the original topic. But, all of those opinions that a person holds, all those thoughts, all of that information, all of what's important to them, it all plays in to what they believe on any given topic and issue. And so you have to really, like I said, just stick with it long enough, stick with the conversation long enough. Don't try to control it. Don't try to manipulate it. Don't try to, direct it. Let it start to become about the relationship, friendship, whatever, just somebody you discuss things with, but like that relationship with a real human being, um, and not just an exercise in trying to prove you're right and prove they're wrong. And then when you start to get that, you really start to see how those viewpoints that you thought were completely incompatible and different start to mesh, and how, wow, I felt like I gave a lot of ground to them, but I still stayed firm on like the core of what I believe. And it turns out that all that time I was giving ground to them, they were giving a bunch of ground to me too. Wow, crazy how that works. And it needs to happen because there's so much ground between us right now. These castles that were right here are moving farther and farther away, and there's all this ground between us until we can't even see each other, and we're just launching high-tech grenades at each other, and it's going to be literal before we know it. And we don't want that to happen. So like we need to start gaining ground towards each other, realizing that these are people, these are our neighbors, these are our fellow Americans that we disagree with. Even if we think their opinions are despicable, we can continue to think they're despicable. We can continue to stand up against them, um, politically, or in whatever means we feel is necessary. But at the same time, like, let's start the process of communicating with each other and hope that we reach each other, um, before it gets out of hand, which for some people it already is. So thanks for watching this video, and I will catch you next time.